Christopher Steele, the MI6 agent, the foreign spy who used to work for MI6, and I understand Great Britain is our ally. I get it. He's a friendly spy, right? But they're still a foreign nation. They're still a foreign entity. And Christopher Steele was hired by the Hillary Clinton campaign through a bunch of carve-outs to dig up dirt from Russians on then-candidate Trump. That is a presidential campaign in the United States of America paying money to a foreign agent, literally a foreign agent, to help influence their campaign. And we just now saw these emails between Christopher Steele and Bruce Orr of the Justice Department. Let's get into that part of this story now. Tom Fitton is with us from Judicial Watch. Hi, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Larry. I think I was shadow banned.
Exactly. It's happening a lot. They've actually reached talk radio now. We're all in trouble. I want to get to some of the big picture stuff that you've been able to accomplish so we can sort of look at the greatness that Judicial Watch has been able to do. But let's talk specifically about the latest story in the news and these emails. It looks like Christopher Steele had a whole lot of dealings with the Justice Department, even when he was supposed to be persona non grata.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he had his own office there. He was met, according to Judicial Watch documents documents we uncovered from the FBI through a lawsuit. He had at least 13 meetings with the FBI at DOJ in 2016 before November. And then subsequently, Congress is now getting documents. You can bet they know they're coming out to Judicial Watch, so they're going to give them to Congress so Congress doesn't get mad. That Orr and Steele were meeting repeatedly about really Steele's efforts to take out Donald Trump. I mean, that's what the notes indicate that Bruce Orr have made, at least with during one of the meetings. He talks about a Hail Mary leak that he orchestrated, Steele did, designed to take out Trump. And why is the Justice Department doing this? In light of the document that we uncovered showing that the FBI deemed Steele not to be a usable, confidential human source. So they continued to use him through Bruce Orr, a cutout, who was conflicted from dealing with him because of his wife's involvement with his employer, Fusion GPS, Steele's employer. I mean, it is an unholy mess, and it may sound confusing. And usually something that sounds confusing it's because it's corrupt. and there's a lot of corruption that was going on in the Obama Justice Department, and it continued into the Trump Justice Department. And unfortunately, the leadership at DOJ, Rosenstein and such, have been oblivious to it, have been covering it up, and they've allowed the Mueller to operate despite the very foundation of his investigation being built on sand, the sand of corruption.
There are very few journalists in Washington, D.C., and a handful of talk radio hosts. I actually consider myself one of them. And only really one or two watchdogs, you're one of those watchdogs, Tom Fitton, who have really been focused on this story from the day we found out the Steele Dossier existed, the week before the presidential inauguration. And we continue to uncover more and more. So what I want to do here is throw some of the challenges at you so you could sort of respond to them. When I bring this up, I hear people on the left or never Trumper types, they always say, well, listen, if it was the plan of the FBI's upper echelon to stop Donald Trump from being elected by doing this investigation, well, didn't work very well because Trump won. They didn't stop him. Is that a fair argument to make?
Well, they're trying to stop him. I mean, they began this investigation with text messages from Peter Strzok saying that we want to stop him. And they were worried if he won, what was going to happen, and Strzok said they had an insurance policy. So they were spying on him and directing resources, both the FISA warrants directed at Carter Page and who knows who else, because there could be others we don't know about, and sending in spies into the campaign. And just because they didn't find anything to derail Trump doesn't mean they weren't trying.
Right.
And, of course, they were also trying to derail Trump by helping Hillary, the same group of people, by not investigating her in a serious way for her criminal misconduct.
Which leads to their next response, as you know, which is, well, then why did they derail her campaign 10 days before Election Day with the Anthony Weiner thing?
Well, the only reason they told anyone about that Anthony Weiner thing was because they were afraid someone else, someone up in New York, or within the FBI, tired of the obstruction of that information being kept from the American people, was going to leak it.
Yeah.
So it was something that was being squelched by Peter Strzok, according to the IG, or he suggests as much. And Comey had to act because they thought it was going to be leaked otherwise. So Comey's hand was forced there because there were whistleblowers about to blow the whistle on the fact they were covering up for Hillary.
And if I remember right, Comey has even said, either in testimony or certainly in one of his myriad interviews to sell his book, that he was quite sure that Hillary was going to win. So he was just sort of getting that. He didn't want to be accused of hiding something that could have affected the election. And he didn't think that he was going to affect the election by putting it out 10 days out.
You know, Comey was the most political FBI director I think ever sit in that office. What a disaster!
Is James? Do you think James
did the country a favor in firing him?
Do you think James Comey is currently facing some serious legal problems because of his admitted leaks that he orchestrated when he was still FBI director, or right after he left the office?
If we had an honestly run Justice Department and prosecutors willing to do the right thing, yes. But that's a big if.
Now, that leads us to another argument I often get from liberals, journalists, never-Trumpers, or as Chris Plante would say, I repeat myself, and that is, wow, what's your big beef? Rod Rosenstein, he's a Trump guy. Jeff Sessions is a Trump guy. Trump's the president now. All these guys who were calling the shots in the Justice Department are all Trump guys.
Well, the most charitable interpretation, Sessions isn't calling the shots with the Mueller investigation. So, and that's the biggest investigation I guarantee the Justice Department has ever undertaken, or at least undertaken in recent years. And Mr. Rosenstein is a DOJ guy first, in my view. And he's unwilling to control the Mueller investigation in appropriate ways. He's conflicted out of the collusion or the supposed obstruction investigation because he recommended that Comey be fired, and then he's also authorized the investigation into whether he should have been fired, whether there was obstruction. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah.
And plus, he's signed on to these shady FISA warrants that had this infamous dossier at its center. So there are people protecting themselves by stonewalling and allowing things to go the way they're going, and they're not protecting the public interest.
Our guest is Tom Fitton. The organization is Judicial Watch, and I truly believe it's the most important watchdog group we have in Washington, D.C. They've really been doing yeoman's work in trying to get transparency here and trying to get all this information out. I'd love for you for a moment, Tom, to sort of sing your organization's praises. You're often called on talk radio or on cable news to be a pundit, to talk about the news of the day, and you're great at it. But you don't get an opportunity to sort of say, this is who Judicial Watch is, this is what we've been able to accomplish. And by the way, you need to support Judicial Watch so that they can keep doing what they're doing. Tell me a little bit about how you go about doing what you do.
Well, we sue the government over misconduct, and oftentimes that includes, thank you, Larry, the failure to follow the Freedom of Information Act Open Records Law. It's the key law that allows non-congressional members to get access to what the government's up to. You know, I was just looking at the last 3 weeks. We got the FISA warrant applications. We got Peter Strzok emails showing he wanted special security clearances while working for Mueller. We received the Steele FBI documents I talked about, documenting payments from the FBI to Steele and the fact they cut him off because he was deemed to be unworthy as a confidential human source. And we just got a court order the other day ordering the FBI to make sure that Comey's records that he's been keeping on his personal email that are government records aren't destroyed. I dare say that's more than Congress has been able to accomplish in recent months.
Yeah.
In terms of oversight of the swamp.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's judicialwatch.org, by the way, if you want to keep Tom doing what he's doing.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me to push.
You bet.
And you can support our work through judicialwatch.org and follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
Listen, you mentioned the 11 payments from the FBI. Have we gotten details on what those payments were? I mean, we're told that they're reimbursing expenses, but let's face it, there's a way to pay for expenses when you're really, I mean, and by the way, those expenses could very well be money that was funneled to anonymous Russians in exchange for their information. Imagine if that were the case. If this money is fungible, right?
Records payments were made. We don't know the nature of them because they're completely redacted. We received 70 pages. 2 of those pages had substantial paragraphs on them. Everything else was blacked out.
And to that, along that same line, do we know how much money was paid to the quote unquote confidential human source or spy, depending on what you want to call him, but the person who was employed by or directed by the FBI to go and infiltrate the Trump campaign? How much was he paid?
Well, that's a whole other ball of wax. And was it the FBI that directed him? Was it the CIA? Was it the Defense Department? Who knows?
That's right. You're right. We don't know who picked up the phone and said, hey, go and meet with George Papadopoulos. We just know that the FBI ended up getting information from him. Bring us back to the Muller trial now. Certainly the Muller trial against Paul Manafort. The prosecution is supposed to rest today. Where do you think that stands? And does it have anything to do with the Trump election?
Other than Manafort was campaign chairman for President Trump for a time, no. We don't need a special counsel to be doing this. I don't know if Manafort's guilty or not. Not at the trial, so I don't know if the special counsel proved his case. But I do know that Manafort probably would never have been prosecuted but for his relationship with Trump, which suggests that he needs to be pardoned. That's what I would do in the end. Really?
And what about the political fallout from that? I mean,
if the president crosses the street and there's political fallout.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but if Maxine Waters, is heading up an impeachment
outrage about everything the president does, so he should do the right thing. They'll be outraged, and they'll move on to be outraged about something else he does the next day.
Yeah, but Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi, if they get the majority this November, and Maxine Waters is leading the ad hoc impeachment committee, they'll say that pardon is obstruction of justice and impeachable offense.
Well, that's a political fight that will continue, and again, impeachment is a political fight, and I don't know if Democrats are going to want to do that, but I think if Democrats retain control or gain control of the House, impeachment will be on the table no matter what the president does. So he should be trying to do the right thing. The political consequences be danged.
Tom Fitton, it's always good to talk to you, and it's always great to see you on cable news fighting the good fight, and I'm glad that you are on that wall. We need you on that wall.
Happy to do it.
Tom Fitton, he is the president of Judicial Watch. Again, it's judicialwatch.org. He's a good man, and he's making arguments that need to be made in this town if we're going to continue. I keep asking, why is President Trump the only one defending himself out there? Where are all the president's men? Remember when Bill Clinton was facing impeachment for obvious reasons, and he had James Carville, and he had Paul Begala, and he had his wife, and he had all of these people who were constantly on television defending him. This president has to do it all himself. Where are all the president's men? Well, listen, Tom Fitton works for a nonpartisan organization, Judicial Watch, but he's doing yeoman's work, and I very much appreciate it. I bet you do, too. Appreciate it. I bet you do, too. Appreciate it.